Unveiling the I Am, Discovering the Eternal Well Within, or the Well of Truth. An article from Charles Fillmore. Jesus answered, "Everyone who drinks this water will be thirsty again, but whoever drinks the water I give them will never thirst. Indeed, the water I give them will become in them a spring of water welling up to eternal life." A well is supplied by a hidden stream coming forth from a point beneath the surface of the earth. Therefore, it is a striking symbol of the inner fountain of truth bubbling up from the soul. The hidden stream supplying every living well has its source way up some mountainside, where the snows and rains of the inexhaustible heavens perpetually feed it. So, the stream of truth flowing into the secret place of the soul has its source in the universal Father, and is without limit both as to quality and quantity. The earth is filled with invisible streams of living water, but we do not tap them and drink the cooling draught until we have dug deep down. So, each soul must go to the hidden stream forever running in unfailing quantity beneath the drifting sands of the outer consciousness. This stream of truth is connected with the one and only source of all life and wisdom, the Lord, the fountain of living waters. Thoughtless, shiftless people have been known to live year after year depending for their water supply upon some surface spring or spasmodically flowing branch, and in times of drought have had to abandon their homes for lack of water. Yet, in after time, some man with faith in the resources everywhere present dug a hole in the abandoned dooryard and found a well that never went dry. The desert of Sahara has for thousands of years had only here and there a little oasis to entertain the weary traveler through its wilderness of sand. And since the days of Jethro, priest of Midian, and long ages before, the swarthy natives have depended entirely upon the widely separated surface water supplies in all the deserts of the Orient. Now has come among them a people with faith in the everywhere present resource, who have said, "Dig and get water." And lo, oases are being formed all over the country. The earth with its laminated ribs of rock, its internal fires and turbid flowing streams, is like unto the body of man, mind asleep, consciousness crystallized. On its surface, the elements in their round of sunshine and shadow, storm and calm, represent the changeable intellect. The electric currents that flow from pole, to sun, to planet, represent the psychic realm, the photographic gallery in which all the images of man's mind take form and semblance of life. But interior to all this is the principle, substance, and intelligence upon which everything rests. That same principle is back of all that man comes in touch with. It is the innermost of his being, and until he recognizes it and draws from it his wisdom, he is an alien in the house of the Lord. Why are we not more generally conscious of this well of truth? Because, first, we are free will, and in our freedom to be what we wish to be, we have chosen to be ignorant. This is one of the privileges of perfect free will, the choice of ignorance. Much foolishness follows the choice of ignorance. In our ignorance, we have looked upon our bodies and said, "This is me. This is all of me. I am this brain that thinks, and when I lose this thinker, I am done for." This perpetual denial of our spiritual nature has separated us from our source, the universal spirit. God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the spirit and in truth. God is spirit, not a spirit, as the old version has it, but just spirit, everywhere present intelligence. We hear a great deal in these days about a new way of communication between people. It is called thought transference or telepathy. For instance, two people who have grown mentally harmonious by long association in the same plane of thought find that they appear to simultaneously mention the same subjects. Their minds are in such exact chord that the thought vibration of one impinges upon the other like the synchronism of two perfectly tuned musical instruments. A New York drummer relates that he accidentally discovered that he could catch his wife's thoughts, and they now make it a practice, when he is absent, to retire daily to a quiet place and hold a silent conversation, although separated by hundreds of miles. This thought transference between man and man is now becoming so common as to be accepted among progressive people without question. It is important because it hints of higher things. What are the requirements of thought transference? First, harmony of interests and aims between the participants. Next, attention. A mother whose whole thought is centered in cooking good dinners cannot get into telepathic communication with her literary daughter. Neither can a drummer, whose mind is filled with thoughts of money-getting, sense the finer thought realm of his religious wife. Each man, woman, and child is the center from which a perpetual thought vibration is circling forth. Every idea held in mind proceeds at once to function through some organ of the brain. Molecular action is set up, heat is produced, and momentum given to the universal ether. It is said by physical science that a pebble dropped by a child in the ocean sets in motion waves whose ever-widening circles finally impinge upon the most distant star of the universe. So, every idea dropped into the mind sets in motion the invisible ethers, and their ever-widening ripples go on and on throughout the years of eternity. If it is an idea founded in truth, it may start forth under the most discouraging circumstances, and he who gave it momentum may be crucified for his temerity, yet it will roll on and on until its mighty thunderings reach the ears of those way down the centuries and call them back to life. Jesus of Nazareth was such a thinker. He it was who said, "God is spirit, and his worshippers must worship in the spirit and in truth." Don't you see what he meant? He referred to the laws of mind. There are no other causative laws. If you want to set up telepathic communication with God, you must come onto his plane. God is spirit. His plane is spiritual. Now, we mention the requirements of thought transference as, first, harmony of interests and aims between the participants. Second, attention. These are identically the requirements of telepathy between you and God. Remember, God is the invisible spirit everywhere present, the living well of truth within you, not absent for a moment of your existence, but nearer and dearer than your father, mother, brother, or sister. You are the temple of the living God. He lives in the same house with you. It may be that you have taken up your abode in the basement and do not know that there are upper stories. If you want to communicate with him, you must come up higher. The first step is to analyze yourself and see if your interests and aims are identical with his. Can you say with Jesus, "I do those things which are pleasing unto the Father"? Have you given up all desire to do anything on your own account and dedicated your whole life to God? This you must do before your interests and aims can become identical with his, for how can you know what his desires are until you have let go of your own worldly projects? A great many people assume to know what God's aims and interests are. They have their own ideas about how his work should be done, and they proceed to do it in their own way. They use the substance and life of God to rear structures of their own selfish ambitions. This is the slaying of the Lamb which has taken place from the foundation of the world. They are honest enough in motive. They desire to do good, but they are ignorant of the conditions that must exist between themselves and the Father. God is spirit is the most important statement that Jesus ever made. One whose consciousness is centered in form, things, limitations of every description, insists upon having a creator of limitations. God to him is a personal being with monarchical tendencies. The Jews believe Jehovah to be a God of vengeance, a kind of Jack the Giant killer who was angry with the wicked every day. The Orthodox Christian world of today has this same concept of God, and any Sunday you can hear God's likes and dislikes described by the average minister of the gospel. You will observe that these ministers invariably invest God with the parts and passions of an unusually arbitrary and unreasonable man. This idea of God prevails among all people who have not thought carefully about the matter. The parents have believed in that kind of a God, and the children have accepted it as correct without using even everyday common sense. Thus, it has grown to be a race belief that God is a fickle despot. But Jesus of Nazareth did not recognize that kind of a God. On the contrary, he rung the changes over and over that God is spirit, limitless being, everywhere present, yet nowhere confined. How could God be a personal being and at the same time be inside of Jesus? He said, "Not I, but the Father within me, he doeth the works." Orthodoxy says it was the Spirit of God within him, but he did not say that. He said God was in him, within him. Then they say he was God himself. But Jesus did not claim to be God. Don't you believe that I am in the Father, and that the Father is in me? The words I say to you, I do not speak on my own authority. Rather, it is the Father, living in me, who is doing his work. Now, if you are blinded by this limited concept of God, You must rend the veil of the temple and come into a larger comprehension of the Father. God is spirit. He is omnipresent principle, substance, and life. The Spirit of God interpenetrates the molecules of your body, your mind, and all your surroundings. You have lived in this sea of life always. There never was a moment that you were separated from it. For in Him we live and move and have our being. This is the first step in making harmony with God, to recognize His omnipresence. You can never communicate with God so long as you see Him as a personal being located at some definite place. The recognition of the fact that God is spirit everywhere present is fundamental to the understanding of the deep things of spirit. This contracted idea of God arises from your own contracted idea of yourself. If you realized what you are, you would begin to get a correct idea of what God is. God is spirit, and they that worship Him must worship Him in spirit and in truth. How could a being who believes that he was born into consciousness a few brief years ago and will die a few brief years hence, and who thinks that he is a mere bundle of flesh, blood, and bones, how can such a being worship a God who is spirit and who must be worshipped in spirit? Where is the point of contact between their minds? How can thought transference take place between two minds so widely separated in interests and aims? Here is the gist of the whole question. The true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father seeketh such to worship Him. He cannot change His spiritual liberty and conform to our limited, narrow views of Him. We must realize our true being and thus rise to His plane of understanding. We are in the image and likeness of God, the sons of the Father, like Him in attributes, but free to be what we will to be. The first step, then, in getting acquainted with this indwelling presence is to cut loose from the prevalent ideas about man. We must deny without reserve all fleshly limitations. We must take our places in the Godhead as idea, spirit in the process of manifestation. You are not flesh and blood, nor are you under the law of flesh and blood. If you will take a firm stand and claim your place in being, you are spirit, one with the all-spirit, and all of its possibilities are your possibilities. All thine are mine, and mine are thine. Through the power of your word, you have created the belief that you are grass, and through that same word you must let go of that belief and acknowledge your true status as the idea of omnipotent mind. Then you must fearlessly and conscientiously seek to know what concessions are necessary on your part in order to come into a full consciousness of your sonship. Through your thinking, you have produced conditions that have separated your sphere of intelligence from the wisdom within, and by that same process, you must let go and create anew. Don't overlook the fact that there is a method in the creative process. Don't let your dominant idea that all things are the result of thinking blind you to the foundation principles in being upon which all right thinking must be based. On the way back to the Father's house, the Son discovers that all conditions of consciousness are the product of thinking, and in the enthusiasm of his newfound power, he proceeds at once to decree all sorts of things. He forgets all about there being such a thing as design back of all orderly thinking. He sees that which he wants and proceeds to vigorously decree that it shall be his, regardless of its adaptability to his permanent needs, or his capacity to use it after he has gotten it. Much short-sighted work is done by metaphysicians in this stage of realization, and they are frequently appalled at the trials they bring upon themselves through the mental currents which they set in motion. For instance, a mother sees what she thinks is a brilliant marriage for her daughter and sets to work decreeing silently that it shall be consummated, which it is. Afterwards, it is disclosed that her daughter's husband is a criminal and was at the time of the wedding. Or, a man with certain business or professional ambitions sees an opportunity to attain his object through this silent law of mind, and does it. Afterwards, he discovers that he is not satisfied with the attainment of his object, and finds he missed by his lack of foresight the very thing that would have brought him satisfaction. We are always striving for things which, when we have gotten them, do not bring the pleasure we anticipated, all of which shows a lack somewhere. We know that the supreme wisdom must possess the capacity to bring forth conditions of harmony and satisfaction. That we do not bring about such results indicates a shortcoming. We have left out some of the factors of the process. In the Godhead, man stands as the will, the former, which is, in other words, the thinker. Thus, in the macrocosm, humanity represents the thinking faculty of being. In its creative process, being is separated into distinct planes of consciousness, each of which seems separate from the others. Swedenborg calls them discrete degrees. There is the plane of intelligence, and the plane through which abstract consciousness becomes concrete, and then there is the plane of the things formed. Now, each of these planes of consciousness has intelligence and power within its sphere of action. Intelligence knows, sees, and perceives the relations of all things, and just how they must be grouped to produce a given result, but intelligence cannot produce that result without a process. The first factor in that process is will, the thinker, and through it, the result is reached. But will is a blind force, and when separated from intelligence, sends forth malformations. Now, all these are the factors in the process, and not the principle itself. The principle is the I am of every man. He it is who can amalgamate intelligence, will, and consciousness into a harmoniously working power that will bring forth the design forever held in divine mind. You are I am. Don't set your thinker to work creating conditions for you until you have consulted intelligence. Don't start your building until you have studied the plans of the architect. If you have forgotten that you are I am and are bewildered in the limited whirl of the thinker, stop the process and wait upon the Lord. Rise into your wisdom sphere and wait. Don't reason, but wait. You may have to wait days, months, or years, but wait. You will find it to your advantage to do so. We all want to get in touch with God, and God is spirit. We want to know what spirit is and what our condition is when we are conscious of being spirit. To do this, we must stop this eternal mechanical thinking process that repeats its weary round day after day, and find out why it is that we do not get immediate results since we have discovered the creative law. All things and all states of consciousness are produced by thinking, but all states of consciousness are not harmonious. Neither does a superabundance of things bring happiness, which proves that there is somewhere a lack. That lack is plainly in a failure to know the right relation of things. And who may know that without wisdom? The world looks today upon wisdom as something which may be acquired through the study of books, or by experience in the applied sciences. This, however, is not the spiritual wisdom which manifested so brilliantly in Jesus of Nazareth that even his Pharisaical contemporaries marveled at it, knowing that he had never studied letters. This wisdom comes direct from the Father to the inner sanctuary of each soul, and whosoever drinketh of this water shall never thirst, but it shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. This well of water springing up into everlasting life is regarded by the average man as a pretty metaphor, but that it is an absolute reality and has a location in his body, he does not for a moment believe. Jesus of Nazareth dealt in allegories freely, but every one of them had a substantial foundation. The well of everlasting life springing up in man is no exception. It is possible to attain a state of consciousness where the universal life is poured into the body so bountifully that the recipient senses it as plainly as he would the shock from an electric battery. It is not, however, an external sensation, but internal. An entirely unknown set of faculties is opened up in the soul centers of the devotee, and he finds that the divine life actually springs up within him as a living stream flowing into his very flesh from an invisible fountain. This is the living word that becomes flesh and dwells among men. It is the water of life that whosoever drinketh shall never thirst. People cannot understand how such a wonderful elixir of life exists within their very bodies, and they be wholly unconscious of it. Yet living streams of water percolate all through the earth, unknown to those who walk on its surface. So in the body, the vital forces flow unseen. Have you ever communed with the wellsprings of your life and intelligence? Have you ever gone into your closet and there prayed to the Father in secret? Intelligence is an invisible principle. Life is an invisible principle. All power comes from the invisible. You are ignorant of your invisible potentialities because you have ignored them. Whatever you center your I am upon, that fills the cup of your consciousness. If it is upon things of the external world, things made and gone to seed, why, it is those things that fill the eye of your I am. But things are not wisdom. Things are not life. They are merely the evidences of wisdom and life. If you wanted to consult the architect who planned a building, you would not expect to do so by confining yourself to an examination of the building. It might by its symmetry commend itself to you, and thereby suggest a desire to know the architect, but your intelligence must form a common point of contact with his intelligence before you can know his capacity for designing. Exactly the same procedure is necessary in finding out God. If you concentrate your whole attention upon his creations, you will never find the Creator. The Maker always transcends that which is made. When you understand that God is Spirit, everywhere present at all times, and that you are Spirit and may under proper conditions come into conscious relations with his Spirit, you have found the key that will unlock all the mysteries of existence. But don't forget the conditions under which your spirit may be the inlet and outlet of God's wisdom and life. The first condition that is mentioned as necessary to thought transference is identity of interests. To make your interests identical with God's, you must make a complete consecration of yourself to his guidance. He is the one fount of wisdom, and from no other direction can you get the intelligence necessary to do your work. You locate yourself in the things of sense, or the place of soul, by your mental attitude. If you examine your motives and aims carefully, you will doubtless find that they relate to your own affairs and life. Unless you have wholly dedicated yourself to the Father, you will find that selfishness dominates. This must be sacrificed on the altar of the living God if you enter into his holy of holies. If you are ambitious in any direction, you must give it to God. Human ambition is an ephemeral affair and never brings satisfaction. If you lack ability, you must turn its mortal limitation over to God. If you are weak, sick, or poor, turn all these human shortcomings over to the bountiful Father. Let go as rank error every failing which the mortal eye beholds. Throw overboard this earthly ballast. Make a connection with the mind of spirit at any cost. Don't try to hypnotize yourself into the belief that you have already made the connection unless your words demonstrate what you decree. Something is lacking so long as we are not conscious at every breath of the inner well of wisdom and life. We have not gotten back to the Father's house until we feel the kiss and see the gold ring put upon our finger. That loving Father is now here. As we speak, his Spirit reaches forth to meet our spirit, for he seeks such to worship him. And that is the end of the article.